Preseason football is finally here. Week 1 is just around the corner, and fantasy football content here is humming right along. But this content today is really the big time video that you all wait for every single offseason. Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially time to start talking about our must-have players. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners. And ladies and gentlemen, today's must-have video is going to be insane, in-depth, and ready to help you win some fantasy football leagues, because these three players that I'm going to be talking about today at their given ADP right now are absolute must-haves for me, and I'm going to explain in depth why that is. But hit the like button for me first, because if this video gets to 1,000 likes, I'm going to give away a free draft guide to somebody that leaves me a comment down below. So hit the like button, and during the video, leave me a comment letting me know your thoughts on these players listed today. And on top of that, it is time for another giveaway here on the Fantasy Headliners. Our August giveaway is extremely unique and something that is going to make a great addition to your household to talk to your friends about and to show off to family, because this is pretty cool. We have got an autographed Mike Evans cleat that we're going to be giving away if you head over to prizepicks.com, or if you download the PrizePicks app, create a free account using code word headliners, and deposit $20. If you do all of that, you are going to be put in a drawing to win a Mike Evans cleat, and you're going to get a free draft guide. So if you haven't gotten the draft guide yet, this is a great opportunity for you. This is going to be our August giveaway, thanks to our friends over at Pristine Auction and at PrizePicks. So once again, prizepicks.com or the PrizePicks app. Create a free account. Code word headliners doing that. Deposit $20. You're going to get a free draft guide, and we're going to put you in a drawing to win this autographed Mike Evans cleat. This thing is pretty cool. But ladies and gentlemen, these players, these three guys that I'm going to talk about today, I don't think are getting enough love that they should, especially given the potential discount that you could be grabbing them at on draft day. So hit that like button for me, and let's jump into player number 1. This one may surprise you, and it may not. We'll see here in a second. But given my love for the 49ers offense this year, Elijah Mitchell is also going to make his way into a must-have category for me. Last season in 2021, he finished as the RB25 with 155.5 half PPR fantasy points. His current ADP right now is putting him at 45 overall, which would be the 21st running back off the board. Now, if you've heard me here on the Fantasy Headliners lately, you know that I love Trey Lance. You know that I love what Kyle Shanahan can do with the weapons around him. Debo, Kittle, Elijah Mitchell, Brandon Ayuk, all of these guys right now are going at a discount. And that is why I have been so in love with them, because no one is really jumping to draft them this year. Now, is the quarterback situation part of it? Maybe. What else is a part of it? I don't know, but let's go ahead and change your mind right now. In 11 games last season for Elijah Mitchell, he had 207 attempts, ran for 963 rushing yards, and had 5 touchdowns on the ground. The overall numbers, if you just look at those numbers and you say to yourself, okay, like maybe those numbers don't jump off the page to you. Maybe they don't make you super excited. But when you start to jump into it a little bit more, you find out that the efficiency numbers and some of the overall volume last year for Elijah Mitchell were good. I mean, his 207 attempts were 13th most by running backs. His 963 rush yards were 8th most. He averaged 4.65 yards per attempt, which was 12th among running backs. And again, when you take a look at efficiency, the dude had 901 yards after contact last season. 5th among running backs. So he was a guy that was definitely making people pay for trying to tackle him. And, His 3.7 yards after contact per attempt was 6, and he also punished you and made you miss 2. 42 missed tackles, 11th among running backs. But he has a little burst. He has a little giddy up, okay? He's not just a power back. 31 runs last year of 10 or more yards were 5th among running backs. 236 yards last year were accumulated on runs of 15 or more yards, which were 10th. And he ran for 57 first down, 7th among running backs. I mean, again, the dude was a little bit of everything last year. And the overall numbers, when you look at them, they might not jump off the table to you. And that's really one of the reasons why people aren't drafting him. But one of the biggest reasons, and what I would lock in, is the number one response I hear as to why people would not want Elijah Mitchell: the percent of snaps played, or the perception that Kyle Shanahan runs a fully committee out of his backfield. That doesn't happen, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why that perception might be a little bit out there, or maybe exaggerated a little bit. Week 1, 2, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 17, and 18. This was every single week last year that Elijah Mitchell played. Again, did miss a few games, only played in 11 games. But in the games that he did play, here's his snap percentages each and every week: 64, 61, 68, 66, 64, 66, dropped down to 53, had 70 and then 84 in week 12 and 13, 58 and 53. So as you can see there, in a majority of the games that Elijah Mitchell played last year, he was above the 60% snap rate for running backs on the San Francisco 49ers. Now, when you take a look at some of these numbers, you might say, well, Kyle, he wasn't really over 60%. I mean, it was just barely. Or you might throw out the fact that he just barely eclipsed the 50% mark in week 10, 17, and 18. And I would tell you that if I put an asterisk next to the games in which no other running back had 10 or more carries, that would be all but one game last season. So games in which Elijah Mitchell played last year, there was only one game where another running back on the team had 10 or more carries. In fact, in all of these games listed here, there was only one other game in which a player had 10 or more carries, because some of you are probably asking about Debo right now. And you might be like, well, he wasn't really a running back, so maybe you're not counting him. No, there was only one other game. And that was in week 5 when Jimmy Garoppolo had 10 rushing attempts. Other than that, there was no other player in any of these games listed that had more than 10 carries other than Elijah Mitchell. In that one game in week 10, Elijah Mitchell had 27 attempts and Jeff Wilson Jr. only had 10. So when you break it down and you take a look at how many attempts, because maybe you're not satisfied with snaps. Maybe you say, well, just because Elijah Mitchell was on the field doesn't necessarily mean that he was this great guy that, maybe he wasn't getting the touches, maybe he wasn't getting the attempts. As the season went on, Elijah Mitchell was trusted more and more and more by Kyle Shanahan. I mean, in week 1 as a rookie, he had 19 attempts. And I will admit, last season, one of my misses was Trey Sermon. I wasn't absolutely propping him up to everybody, but I thought he was a later round guy that could end up establishing some value, knowing where they drafted him at. But it was really Elijah Mitchell that impressed in training camp and that really caught the eye of the coaching staff. And then he was given that opportunity from week 1 on. Only 2 weeks last year in games that he played that he had less than 10 attempts. There was only 2. That could happen to anybody. From week 1 through week 9, the other 4 games, 19, 17, 18, and 18. And then in week 10, 12, 13, 17, and 18, 27, 27, 22, 21, 21. So this kind of myth heading into this season that Kyle Shanahan only utilizes a running back by committee, I kind of just showed you was false last year. Elijah Mitchell is coming back. They do have a rookie that might be getting some look. Jeff Wilson Jr. is still there. Yes, Trey Sermon is still there, but are we really paying attention to him? Mostert's out the door. So Elijah Mitchell is the guy right now. He is the guy. And he is going to be the guy as long as he stays healthy. Now, the one downside to Elijah Mitchell is he's not going to get a whole lot of work in the passing game. He just won't, which is okay. Because let's say you want to draft this guy a little bit early, and let's try and take him as maybe like the running back 16 or 17 off the board, you're probably still going to return that type of value. In fact, as I'm looking at it right now, I'm basically saying that I'll probably take Elijah Mitchell over David Montgomery now this season. I'm worried about David Montgomery. David Montgomery isn't going to do a whole lot of work in the passing game, maybe some, not a ton, but right now I feel like the potential volume and the efficiency from Elijah Mitchell in an offense that is going to be a very good offense this year has more upside than what David Montgomery does this year with such a poor offensive line. Elijah Mitchell has climbed boards quickly for me. When we adjust rankings next, he's going to be even higher than he is now. I love him this season, knowing that running back by committee that we've been told about wasn't necessarily true last season. A wide receiver that I definitely want to grab this year, Mike Williams. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen would still be my number one pick. And a lot of the times this season, I told you I like Mike Williams, but I'm concerned about how they are going to be utilizing him this season. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Mike Williams finished last year as the wide receiver 10 with 208.6 half PPR fantasy points. It's interesting to me that a guy that finished in the top 10 last year is being taken as the wide receiver 19 and dropping to 54 overall. His baseline stats, when you take a look at the box score, in 16 games last season, he had 122 targets, 76 receptions, 1,146 receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns. He kind of gets lost in the fold a little bit, yes, because of Keenan Allen, and then because he's not the alpha on his team, he's really looked at as being a guy that, yes, we like him, but what are we going to get from him? Well, I mean, you got the 11th most receiving yards in the and he was tied for 9th in terms of touchdowns last season, and he averaged 3.22 fantasy points per touch, which was tied for 14th among wide receivers. So the dude did good things last year. Now, what is the one thing that Mike Williams has always been known for throughout his career? It was that big playability, and last season that continued to be a part of it. 9 receptions of 40-plus yards last year tied him for first, and he had 4 touchdowns of 40 or more yards last year, which tied him for second. And then among wide receivers that had at least 100 targets last season, he was 13th in average depth of target. He was 10th in yards per target. He was 4th in yards per reception, and he was 5th in yards after the catch per reception. So again, the deep playability, the big playability for Mike Williams was still there last year. But it was kind of a tale of two seasons for Mike Williams because his fantasy football finishes last year. In weeks 1 through 5, he was the wide receiver 1 with 100.6 fantasy points. But then all of a sudden from week 6 to week 18, he fell all the way down to wide receiver 29 with only 108 fantasy points. That's right. In weeks 1 through 5, he scored 100.6. And then in weeks 6 through 18, he only scored 108. He only scored 7.4 more points the rest of the season compared to what he did in weeks 1 through 5. That's not cutting it. And there was a big reason for it. And we're really going to dive into that here in just a second. Weeks 1 through 5, he had 3 top 10 finishes at the wide receiver position. And then he only had 2 more the rest of the season. So what was it? What happened in weeks 1 through 5 that gave Mike Williams all of a sudden this huge upside, this stability that we had never seen before? Well, it was because he was doing something that he had never done before. His route tree was far different in weeks 1 through 5 than it was in weeks 6 through 18 and the rest of his career. Because like I said, Mike Williams has always been known as a deep target, a deep threat, a big play guy, but he's never been utilized in that short part of the field. And in weeks 1 through 5 last year, they finally did that. In fact, in weeks 1 through 5, on targets that were 0 to 9 yards past the line of scrimmage, he was tied for 4th in targets, 6th in receptions, 3rd in receiving yards. He had 3 touchdowns, which was the most for any wide receiver in that area. And he had 92 yards after the catch, which was 5th. So last season in weeks 1 through 5, they really took Mike Williams and they said, we are going to let you utilize the entire route tree. And ladies and gentlemen, you know what? I want to show you. And thanks to Next Gen Stats, I have got several charts here that show you exactly what I mean. Take a look at the charts there on the right-hand side of the screen. This is from week 1. All right, first week of the season. Mike Williams had 8 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown. Look at the routes there. A majority of those routes are being ran either to or in front of the 10-yard line past the line of scrimmage. Again, look at the different route tree. He wasn't just streaking down the field. He wasn't just going deep. He was running some out routes, some curls. He was slanting over the middle of the field. They did add in some bigger plays and some bigger opportunities. But look at some of those yards after the catch. I mean, that slant there on the left-hand side that you see where he was running a slant over the middle of the field, stopped and turned it back to the left. Look at all the yards after catch there, which can be noted in green. And even his touchdown he scored was less than 10 yards away from the line of scrimmage. He was really utilized as that. Let's take a look at the next game. Kind of the same thing here. I mean, even seeing a target out of the backfield, running a sweep behind the field. Again, another touchdown, just past 10 yards. This was a guy that was being utilized all over the place. And that was the big difference. Let's take a look at, I believe this was week 5 right here. Week 5. We've got like one really big route, a seam that he ran out of the slot, which, again, they did kind of move him around just a little bit, not too much. But again, it was about getting him those targets that were less than 10 yards past the line of scrimmage and giving him the opportunity to use that big playmaking ability, use that big body, get a little bit of burst there, get some mismatch there at the line of scrimmage. And then that's where he really excelled. I mean, this dude was all over the place. Now, take a look as we get a little bit further into the season. Okay, things start to change a little bit. Another good game from him here, 8 receptions, 165 yards, and 2 touchdowns. This coming against Cleveland. But look at those targets, okay? Now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 targets that were 10 or more yards past the line of scrimmage. Still utilized him on those short routes that we talked about, but those targets started to get further and further down the field. And then we start getting towards the end of the season, this coming, I believe, in like week 13. Now he's just not getting many targets at all there. All but 3 of his targets, or excuse me, 4 of his targets were were before the 10-yard mark. So now we're looking at it and saying, okay, this is a guy that's being targeted even more down the field. And then we get to the end of the year, last week of the season against Las Vegas. And I mean, this is where things really went crazy. I mean, they just totally forgot about the game plan. Now, he had a great game, 9 receptions, 119 yards. Part of that was this game against Las Vegas was pretty crazy, a lot of back and forth scoring. But now we've got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 targets that were past the 10-yard mark. So again, as the season went on, they completely abandoned this use of him in those short yard situations. But I'm going to take a second to look at this and say, you know what? This coaching staff for the LA Chargers, I believe in them. And I believe that they are going to take a look at the film. They're going to take a look at these statistics showing how good Mike Williams was closer to the line of scrimmage, and they're going to try to utilize that this year. So for me, if I can get Mike Williams as my wide receiver 2, if I've gone in a heavy running back type of situation, then for me, Mike Williams is my wide receiver 2. I'm happy with it because I think he's going to provide a lot of upside. We know they're going to be throwing the ball a lot this year, and we know that those numbers that we saw from last year, even if they don't get a whole lot of those, if they don't draw him back into what they did to begin the season, we know that he's a guy that still could just pop off at any point in time. So given his current ADP, I'm absolutely okay with it because a lot of people forgot what Mike Williams did to begin the year. But now I just detailed for you why he was so good to start the year. My final must-have player for this video, George Kittle. Like I said, I'm all over the San Francisco 49ers this year. Mainly because if you take a look at their numbers, and you've seen this in every video that I've done so far, their playmaking ability is fantastic. They make people miss. They knock people down. They gain yards after the catch. They're scrappy. They go for the big plays. They can make any little play into a gigantic play. And that's why I love the 49ers offense. And yes, I believe Trey Lance is going to absolutely make Kittle, Debo, and Ayuk stars this season. Oh, and of course, Elijah Mitchell, who I already brought up in this video. But George Kittle in 2021 was the tight end for 169.8 fantasy points in half PPR leagues. His current ADP sits him at 41 overall, which is tight end 4 off the board. He's my tight end 3 right now. And he is the guy, and the reason I have him as a must-have is because he is the guy that if we're going to skip on if we're going to skip on Kelsey and Mark Andrews, George Kittle is the guy that I want to have, and you can get high tight end 1 production that is going to potentially rival Kelsey and Andrews. You can get him at a discount right now. Last season in 14 games played, 94 targets, 71 receptions, 910 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. Now, amongst tight ends last year, not bad. But again, he missed time. He only played in 14 games last season. So his targets were 7th, his receptions were 6th, and his receiving yards were 4th. So from an overall volume standpoint, George Kittle did just fine for himself, given where he finished in terms of only having 14 games. And also, he had 3 100-yard games in only 14 games played last season. Andrews had 5 in 17 games. So Mark Andrews wasn't like this dude that was going absolutely above and beyond George Kittle. I mean, if George Kittle had played an entire season, probably you would have seen him a lot closer to Mark Andrews than what he was. And George Kittle, his big play ability, I absolutely love it. 461 yards after the catch last season, 7th among tight ends, and he had 6.5 yards after the catch per reception, which was tied for 6th. His 9.85 yards per target was 3rd. He was 6th in yards per reception, and his 2.35 yards per route run was 1st. So every time George Kittle ran a route, he would average 2.35 yards. That was 1st. That was better than any other tight end in the league. And again, I mentioned it a minute ago, making people miss. He forced 19 missed tackles last year. That was tied for 1st among tight ends, and he averaged 0.24 fantasy points per snap, which was 4th. So everything here shows you that George Kittle is an absolute beast at the tight end position. Now, kind of like I mentioned for Mike Williams a minute ago, George Kittle to begin the year last year wasn't too great. He only had 33 fantasy points in week 1 through 4, making him the tight end 11. Then he went down with an injury. And then all of a sudden in week 9, George Kittle comes back, and holy cow, he was on fire. 129.4 fantasy points to end the year, making him the tight end 2. So y'all know, if you've been here for a while, you know that I used to teach at the college level. So I love to get the chalkboard out and do a little bit of math with all of you out there. So let's take a look at some math for George Kittle and what that could mean. Well, since his rookie season, so I'm throwing out his rookie year in this equation because his rookie year is a huge outlier. If you look at that compared to his other seasons, we know tight ends take a little bit of time. George Kittle, his freshman year in the league, okay, but it was really his second year that really got things going. So his per game average after his rookie season, 7.69 targets, 5.61 receptions, 76.42 receiving yards, and 0.34 touchdowns per game. So if you were to take a look at a 17-game season, okay, and what that would look like, 17-game pace, that would mean he would have 130 targets, 95 receptions, 1,299 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns. So if you take all that and put it together, that's going to give you 207 fantasy points in half PPR formats, which last season would have locked him in as the tight end 3 and would have only been a couple dozen points behind Travis Kelce for 2nd. Here's the thing about George Kittle. The reason that you're skipping on him right now is because you're worried about his injury history. But tight ends right now in leagues, outside of the top of them, you're really just looking for touchdown upside. So let's say that you want to hammer the running backs and the wide receivers to start your draft. Draft George Kittle as your tight end 1. And let's say he does miss time.
use the waiver wire. Draft a second tight end to put on your bench if you really want to. But on a weekly basis, if you've got to stream for George Kittle because he gets hurt, just stream the best upside possible plays at the position every year, because guess what? There's going to be tons of tight ends available on the waiver wire. In a 12-man league or a 14-man league, you're still going to have over half the tight ends available because not very many are going to be drafting tight end twos. And you're going to be looking at guys and you're going to say, hey, this is a guy that can score a touchdown this week, because after those top tight end options, the only ones that matter are guys that have high touchdown upside. That's it anyway. And you can find those guys on the waiver wire. So get a potential tight end one type of player at a discount. Hope that he's healthy all 17 games, and know that any game that he plays in, he's going to provide high tight end one numbers. And if you have to replace him for a short amount of time, there's going to be more than enough options for you to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 of my must-have players that I absolutely believe that you need to be drafting because their ADP is way too good right now. And that is what makes them must-have players. Anybody can sit here and tell you, hey, Jonathan Taylor's a must-have. That doesn't matter. Our must-have players are guys that are discounts at their given ADP because the potential upside and the value and the production that they would offer could far surpass where you are taking them. Hit the like button for me. At 1,000 likes, I'm going to give away a draft guide. You got to leave a comment down below, though. So let me know which one of these players you are most in on, and let me know if I changed your mind about any of the players as well. Don't forget about our giveaway with Prize Picks this year. Subscribe if you are new here to the Fantasy Headliners. You are not going to want to miss any of the content that we are dropping the rest of the offseason and the regular season. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm gone. Peace out. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. Y'all stuck on third down. Your content's plain Jane. Headliners on top now. We gonna move and change. Podcast off the rip. Draft guide, so legit. Fantasy world, our game tight. You know we about that chub life. Stuck in a rut and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this Headliner Nation. I'm a headliner.